Started with Holly Odell from TECH B2B wanting a little bit of information about SEO and what we do when we develop search engine optimized content and when we develop websites and so forth. So Sarah and I threw together some quick notes. And as you all know, we put it into the newsletter last week, and a couple of clients expressed interest. We're going to record this meeting, so if anyone wants to throw in any questions without having to publicly ask the question, there's a chat feature built into the WebEx. Feel free to just send me or everyone the question, and I'll be sure to address it. But don't hesitate to chime in with any questions that you have. It's just a real informal meeting, okay? So, search engine optimization, there's two basic parts. There's the content element, and then there's the technical coding factors. Relevant content presented it in a natural language is increasingly important as the search engine algorithms evolve. We basically call this natural language algorithms is what Yahoo and Google are up to. They're analyzing natural speech rhythms, word usage. You know, we're all seeing this even on the AI side, artificial intelligence in terms of bots that can do a little bit of writing. They're doing pro forma stuff of corporate reports creation. So it's basically just turning that algorithm upside down and analyzing the content to make sure that it's not gaming the system and a lot of other gray and black hat techniques that we'll go into farther on. But right now, basically, as all of us know, content is what generally drives, is at the heart of organic SEO. Increasingly, obviously, you've got to have pictures on your website and on your page that are reflected back. And we're going to get onto the technical aspects of what you have to do and how to handle those photos so that they'll be SEO positive. Of course, now it's more important also to not simply have static images, but to have podcasts, to have multimedia video. All of these increase your search rankings along with a number of other things, including backlinks and others. You can't have just content without coding. The trend is that SEO isn't really something you can entirely outsource as a separate function anymore. It needs to be integrated with all your content creation and promotion from the ground up. That doesn't mean SEO is dead. It's just becoming more of a fully mature and integrated facet of digital marketing. And search engines have evolved to the point where the former black hat and inappropriate SEO techniques don't work, and in fact, they will negatively impact a site. Link farming and keyword stuffing just don't work. And you can't just throw important search terms into an H1 header at the top of your site and hope that the page is going to get ranked in the top 10 or first page of Google results. Scraping a website for content is also a terrible idea. Scraping refers to going to your competitors who's put a lot of time and money into content creation and simply copying and paste over. What's important to see is that it's important to look at the type of content your competitors have, but you can't just steal it. At best, the search engines have gotten very good at identifying the original source of content, which returns higher results than scraped content. And for those, we've started using a new tool, SEMrush, and we've evaluated a lot of them, Alexa and so forth, for competitive keyword analysis. And one thing, even the third-party tools now have access to historic Google data. So they're going to know how long a particular site has been up, how long a particular page has been active. And the one, if you've got two pages that are of duplicate content or majority of duplicate content, Google's always going to give the priority to the one that's the oldest. And it'll use other methods to decide that, hey, this was the original author, this guy is just copying and pasting and scraping the content off. Let's see. If you want to include a little bit of a snippet, you know, I mean, the general rule for copyright infringement, of course, is 10%, which I've always thought is a really vague term anyway, because you could use 10% of a report and still get slapped pretty hard with copyright infringement. But the point being is that they're not doing a word-for-word comparison, but at the very least, you've got to respin your content so that it's coming out in a new way. And as we go into farther about natural language analysis and keywords inside your content, you realize that it becomes kind of difficult to simply respin content while still maintaining the keyword density and positioning that you need to be able to get a good search rank. Sarah Humphrey, my coder, suggests listening to your customers and potential customers, find out what they need to know and how they need that information served. Watch how customers respond to the messaging regardless of the medium. Use A/B testing to gauge effectiveness is a great way. Multivariate is a more complex way. Honestly, at our level of B2B in the small to medium enterprises, most of them don't have the budget, as we all know, for multivariate testing, which means that we might propose a half a dozen different page or content types and organizations for a different page, send those out to individual focus groups, and then see which page is performing better. That's if it's A to B, it's just 2 pages. If it's multivariate, you might have multiple aspects that you're moving around, some pictures, some video, the content, the contact forms, call to actions, and you're not really. It's a more complex way to analyze one page's SEO effectiveness against another. But if you have a great budget, it's a very good way to go about it. Generation guidelines. Target. Pages that have fewer keywords tend to do better in rankings, although it also depends on the length of the content in the page. Aim for 1 to 2% keyword term density. And on the next page we're going to look at some documents that we created here that are in process. Basically, the flow starts with the original domain expert writing the basic content, and then the SEO person analyzing that content against what the keywords that the domain expert anticipates as being the most important, and then confirming what those keywords, what we consider to be the most important, by looking at Google AdWords and Webmaster Tools, and where you can put in a specific search term, and Google will return the volume of that individual search term, as well as suggest both short and long tail search terms that may perform better. If you're not familiar with short tail and long tail keywords, short tail means it's very short. It might be 1 word or 2-word phrase for a keyword. Long tail means that soft blue sweater, not just sweater. So that's the basic line there. When we talk about keywords, we're not talking about the list of meta keywords that we're going to see later on at the top of a page if you looked at code source on a page. Most of the search engines ignore the list of keywords that are next to your title and your meta description. So again, it goes back to natural language analysis. Page length. The general rule has been at least 250 to 300 words. But I've been reading recently where the top 10 Google search results in most actively trafficked subject areas are between 1 and 3,000 words, which is why our company as well as others are developing more long scroll pages for our clients. It allows us to put more information on a page, and then of course you have to be you have to pay a lot of attention to usability and the human interface aspects of it in terms of how you format it and back to top, and do you do sticky navigation, all the things that we've all considered. If you're driving your reader, your visitor down through a long page, how do we make it so they don't get lost, so they can jump from one part of the page to another very easily without having 6 nav bars on there and making it ugly that way.
Sorry,
yeah.
This is Holly. Can I jump in with a question?
Please, Holly, please do.
Okay, so when we're talking about page length, and you said it could almost be 1,000 to 3,000 words, I don't know, is it conventional wisdom? It's always driven into my head through the experience and blogs that I've read that, you have to capture the attention of your reader quickly. You have to give them a reason to stay on the site. I mean, is that counterintuitive to with the word counts for SEO optimization?
I don't think so. It just makes the writer's challenge more difficult. The point being is if you've got 1,000 or 2,000 words of content, as you and I both know as writers, if the information is compelling, we're going to read it all. Certainly it's important to have a great lead, and you do want keyword density still in your first paragraph. You want to make sure that your keywords that are going to be at high frequency on the rest of the page definitely appear at that point, as well as H1 tags, H2 and H3, which are style taglines in other areas. But it's not just about writing short and succinct. And Holly, it's interesting you bring that up. It sounds like it might be counterintuitive because we have to write a really good lead. We have to write short. Everyone tells us that everyone's online attention span is very short. So how do we get them to be, stick around for 1,000 to 3,000 words? Well, if you get 1,000 words, which is something that you and I target all the time when we're writing content for our clients, you're going to be way better off than 90+% of the websites that are out there, especially in the B2B space. I mean, oftentimes we see this all the time where there's 150 words, there's 250 words on a page. And they're old school websites where they're focused on having a lot of different pages. They want the keyword in the URL. They for every single product and service that they provide. And even though there might be, let's take one of our clients like CBS, they may sell 15 different types of medium voltage circuit breakers. Traditionally, they've had 15 different pages, but we know that a single page that covers all 15 types of circuit breakers is actually going to have better placement when it comes to search engine ranking. So that's a long answer to your question, but it is counterintuitive, but it's not really that different from what we're doing every day, Holly. Writing 1,000 words of compelling content. And really the trick is, this is why keyword stuffing is no longer effective, and we'll get to that a little bit later in the presentation. When we talk about, on the first point here, target, pages that target fewer keywords and 1% to 2% density, when we're writing something, we're not saying, okay, I want machine vision to appear 15 times, that I want to achieve 3% to 4%. We don't have actual targets in mind. For the most part, we're sitting down as domain experts. We're writing the content to make it as compelling as possible, and then we start to do the statistical analysis and see where we're at, and we'll go deeper into that. Page length, we talked about 300 words, 300 to 1,000. Purpose, sites that target different keywords on different pages also tend to do better, as opposed to using the same terms repeated on every page. And this gets back to that example we were just talking about with the circuit breaker. If you want to be on a high ranking on a circuit breaker page, having 15 pages that have circuit breaker in the URL and as a keyword is not necessarily going to serve you to your best purpose. Keyword search volume. If you go back to the Google AdWords tools and the Webmaster tools, you can find out how many times the specific keyword is being searched by the public, and you can see regional as well as world results. But by the same token, you don't want to just let that guide, the content that we create. We're more than anything, we have to depend on our knowledge of the industry, our knowledge of our customers, and extract that information from the client whenever we can. So it really is about developing websites today that are natural, that the content, the images are conveying information that's absolutely needs to know and necessary for our groups. If we keep the customer at the core of everything that we do, our search engine, for the most part, through a little statistical analysis and tech, will achieve the results we want for our clients. And we already touched on multimedia. Okay, so this is a page that's in process, and I think, Holly, you'll probably recognize this, something we did some time ago. What we're seeing here on the left is from me, the domain expert in this case, and this is a short application page about a particular machine vision type of system. So I wrote it all and then handed it off to Sarah, and I listed all the keywords that I thought might be relevant, which were too many, of course. And Sarah went through and analyzed and said, okay, how many times do I say each one of these words? Okay, and she's like, all right, well, when you're only using retrofit in the title, automobile is too general, there's too high a volume, we'll never get ranking on that area. Track and trace, I was using it in different ways. I wasn't repeating the exact same phrase for a long tail, so we weren't going to get the density we needed. And the page on the right here, we've got, oh, forgive me, this image on the right, we have a smaller list of keywords that have the density to be relevant. We have alt image descriptions for the image that's going to be on the page, which is critical. Google doesn't know if the picture is of a Chevy or a Ford car or robot building something or not. It does know, it can read the alt text that's there. And by the same token, for PDF and all those, it can read alt text, it can read keywords that are on the PDF. And actually, of course, the PDF, it can be fully indexed now, so that's not really a good example. But you get my point. Meta description. Meta description, while meta keywords are not important, meta descriptions are very important, and that's, along with the title, is what will appear in the search results on Google. But it's also something, Google wants to see that your meta description and the supporting content on the page reflect one another, and show that you're doing this intentionally and that the content is viable. Sarah, is there anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I think so. I think, with the meta description, the search engines don't necessarily give it a higher weight when they're looking at your content, but that is your 153 character chance, more or less. That's about how many characters show up to get somebody to click on your results instead of a competitor's result that shows up. So that's a very important sentence and a half that you get to write and put on your website. And so I think it's important too, and like Holly, I've asked you to copy edit some of these for me, and the thing is it can't always be the most literarily written nice sentence, but you do want to make sure that people know exactly what your page is about when they look at that, and you do want it to match your content. You can't really trick the search engine into thinking your page is about something that it is not, but it does like to see that everything aligns properly, which I'll talk more about in a minute here, but you do want those things to all match and to use those keywords as often as possible in those tags.
There were some other points here. That's why I popped back a slide that Sarah had put in here and that I hadn't fully covered properly. When we talked about the page length and the 300 to 1,000, you have to balance this with a trend towards quick delivery of mobile optimized content. There's a push-pull of quality content and people operating on the fly with mobile devices looking for quick answers. So formatting becomes very important. It's not just about length, and that's what we talked about in terms of making sure that usability and user interaction for even a long page is easy. Because if you have even great content delivered poorly, is not going to capture the attention. Don't use slideshows and scrolling elements to import any kind of deliver information. Nobody stays on the page long enough to wait for a slideshow. When it comes to purpose, when we talk about targeting different keywords, we said each page needs to be different. And all right, so now I've done cleaning up a little bit. The before and after shots again, and here's some other some takeaways that Sarah was good enough to summarize for us. You want to make sure that you've got increased length of page, increased density of keywords, increased use of keyword phrases to support long tail searches, tighten up the meta description to include keywords and encourage click-through, align all metadata with content, increased relevant internal anchor links, and formatting and headings to improve user experience. Interesting note here. We all do AdWords. We do AdWords for our clients and so forth. Let's say your client wants, and we had a similar situation to this the other day. Client wanted 15 keywords, wanted an AdWord campaign that supported it, but didn't want to pay for a big website with a bunch of individual pages with a minimum of 300 words per page that would support these individual keywords, services, and products. And as a result, Google won't even display the AdWords that target those particular keywords that don't meet its threshold requirements. The keyword has to be both in the AdWord description and it has to be on the page that you're linking to, or Google doesn't have to serve up your AdWord at all, or your ad in its AdWord campaign. And in this case, the client had 15 AdWords identified, 4 of which were being properly supported from the website. So Google was still getting its money. It was reaching its daily quota through the auction system, but they weren't serving up all the keywords that the client wanted. So we had to go back to the client, show them this information, and now the client's allowing us to greatly expand their website, which is a good thing for us and the client.
And I'll actually, if you don't mind me making a point here too, which I was going to talk about later, but since you brought up AdWords, I think is really important for people to realize that you can't just buy your returns, because no matter how well you do on an AdWords campaign for terms that you're paying for, the algorithms do not, even though there's kind of a myth that this is true, but it's not, they're not going to improve your organic search returns just because you're paying for search words. So yes, somebody will click on your ad and that will increase your traffic, And generally speaking, websites with more traffic rank higher, but not if that traffic is paid traffic. So you can't have one without the other. You can't have organic SEO, or you can't have paid SEO really without that organic SEO being in place, without that content. So that's something people I think don't necessarily always believe, but it is true. And also going back to kind of Holly's point, which you addressed, and I think is really important, about how do you provide good, lengthy content and then keep people on the page when our attention spans are so small, because there's totally that push-pull. One of the things that we did on this example here was even just adding those subheadings. You can see on the bottom right, or the example to the right after we took a look at that content, adding those headers really breaks up the text and keeps people going, because even if somebody does not read everything on the page, you want them to at least get those important snippets as they're going through. So making sure we have a good chunk at the top so that if somebody doesn't have time, they can at least get what they're looking for in the first paragraph, hopefully. And then if it is relevant, they can kind of scroll down and see what other parts of the page they want to read. Because you're right, people won't necessarily read the whole thing. However, the search engine does include all the content. So it is kind of a trick there. Anyhow, sorry to jump in on that. Wynn, do you have, was there anything else on this one then?
I just had another question. Sorry, guys.
Oh, okay.
Do you recommend AdWords for all the clients?
Do you want to take that one, Wynn?
My apologies, had the mute on, guys. Yes, do we recommend AdWords for all of our clients? We recommend that they participate in it. You know, a lot of the times we may share, there may be a number of different agencies who are involved in a particular client, Holly. So more and more, since we are the content house for all of our clients, as well as, you know, as we're growing our integrated marketing services for other people, more and more folks are using us for that, Holly, is the quick answer to that. We haven't achieved 100%, but we're moving that direction.
Okay. Thanks.
Right. Sarah, did you want me to pass the mouse over to you, or do you want to just tell me when?
Yeah, sure. No, you can pass it over either way.
All right.
Let's see. Sorry, everybody. It hasn't quite popped up yet. Well, shoot, it's not giving me the control, but you can just pop on to the next slide.
All righty.
Not sure what's going on there. There we go. Okay.
Technology. Can't
count on it. I know. Yeah, exactly. From your computer guru, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry about that. So this is the first thing here is just, you know, making sure that, like we've talked about already here, making sure that your coding supports your content. Basically, like I said, search engines have gotten smarter, and there's nothing that as a computer programmer, nothing that I can or would want to do to try and trick Google. There's, you know, nothing that the search engines aren't going to figure out on your page by looking at your content. So my job is really to verify the purpose of the page and getting that alignment correct, and not just for the search engine, for also for the users. So they can title on those headings, and making sure, you know, that this is the page that they want to be looking at, because that attention span is, you know, so short. We have to get it right immediately. And we also want to make sure we don't make any programming mistakes, which we've seen recently, where, you know, the bots are not allowed to crawl, you know, certain pages on our site when we, in fact, do want them to crawl and index those pages. So the term that you would hear and that we said is alignment, and that's just making sure that the page titles, the H1 headers, the content, and even the page URL match to some degree. As Wynn was saying, it's not as important anymore that URL match to your content, and that's obviously what shows up in your browser address bar. It's something that used to be very important and is not so much anymore as everything's gotten more sophisticated. So and I mentioned before too that meta description is incredibly important, because that's really one of the things that we use. It's programmed in, and we use it to increase conversions, because it's our chance to show the human user that what shows up in the search engine results page is what that they were looking for. So if you have a bad description, or worse yet, no description at all for your page, it's just your page title, people are generally, at least what I would do as a user, is skim right over it and go right on to the next one to find that snippet of text that I was looking for that makes sense for my search. So another note about programming here, one really common mistake I see is that programmers will use heading styles to lay out the design of the page. And this is kind of a web geek thing that I'll get into very briefly. But the thing is that the coding of the site and how your site looks can be totally different. So the programmer can make your site look like anything they want, but they shouldn't be misusing heading styles. That should only be reserved for that important content. I've seen more than once where the heading styles are applied to something like a logo or a click here link. And that would be like a link where the anchor text, you know, what you actually click on is simply click here. Well, that shouldn't be an H1 because that's not something that people are searching for on Google that you want your page to pull up for. You want to have your content in those tags. So that's something that, you know, something that I need to do as we're going through, and something that you want your programmer to be really careful about is making sure that the content is properly coded and that we're not misusing styles anywhere. Let's see, I've already talked about those meta descriptions, and then also the alt text, like Wynn mentioned, for videos, images, and other, you know, multimedia thing. Obviously, we want to do this properly just because it supports accessible things. So if people are using screen readers, or if they have their images blocked because they're on, you know, limited bandwidth or something like that, we want to have that text be accurate. But Google also returns websites, when you do a search, obviously we all know you get those image results, you get video results, and we want to make sure that we can show up wherever possible in those mixed returns. And then a final note on that, the anchor links that we talked about, you know, that applies to anchor links that are in your content as well as in your menu structure. So we want to be as specific as possible in using the keywords there, wherever it's possible and it doesn't make something unwieldy, because obviously we want to think about our users first. But including those keywords where we can is really important. Let's see, if you want to go ahead and switch to the next slide. Thanks.
Got it.
Okay, great. And please jump in if you have questions, guys. Here's another, you know, web geek page that I was talking about. This is just kind of a visual example. If you ever want to look on the page source of a website page to see their metadata or anything else, all you have to do is right-click and click View Page Source. And so you can see it's kind of small, probably, but you can see that they've got, you know, at the top, they've got a little bit of code about the page type there, and then they've got the meta name in these tags, and you can see description, keywords, some instructions for the robots, the copyright, all that kind of thing. So, and also you can see that they've included their Google Analytics code and things like that can help out with your SEO as well, and you can see the page title down near the bottom. And actually, if you want to go ahead and jump to the next slide, because I kind of just did a bigger view, so we can see, you know, kind of how this looks in the back end. And this, like I said, this isn't something that you generally need to look at, but it is a quick way if you're looking at a competitor's site and you're curious what they think their keywords are, or curious, you know, to see if they've included these key phrases and names in their header titles, you can look at it here. And let's see, a few other things. You can go ahead, and, unless somebody has a question, we can move on to the next slide, Wynn.
Gotcha.
There you go, thank you. All right, so a few other things that we can do to help with our search return results, because not everything is content related. For the most part it is, but there are a few things in how our websites are put together that's going to impact how we show up in results. You can have an incredibly relevant and wonderful page, but if for some reason you are on an ancient server and it's not up to date and it doesn't, you know, you're not showing up quickly, it takes your page a minute to load, it's not going to return high in the results. Google doesn't want to return content like that because it's not helpful to users.
Sarah, does that also include using over-resolution images, which is something that people do all too often?
Yes, thank you. You do not want to load, and the page speed, and you'll see the next bullet point under there, the mobile responsive design. Those two things are so closely tied together, and it's something we've seen quite a bit of recently. Number one, people are viewing your site on every kind of device with every kind of connection. So the faster you can supply the information in your content, better. And I mean literally the quickest page load is the best, and it is something that the algorithms look at. So we want to have all the images optimized, and if you don't need it to show up on mobile, a lot of times the developer will just hide that content using CSS tags. However, it still loads on that person's phone. So if your phone is sitting there and you're watching your little circle dial and wonder what's going on, it could be loading something that you're not even going to see on that device. So we just don't want that to happen at all. We also use things like a content delivery network, which is something where servers all over the world will store a copy of your website. And then depending on who's looking for your site, their location, they'll actually deliver your site from the server closest to that person. So that kind of thing really speeds up your delivery and doesn't put you in a corner where you have to have an overly simple site. You can still do something fairly complex, and it loads a lot faster. And then also just simple server-side caching things and browser caching to, setting those rules up so that your site, loads quickly is very helpful. I actually had somebody earlier this week ask if there was any kind of limit to the number of photos you could have on a site. He wanted to know if there's a rule of thumb, can I only have 5 photos or this thing's going to load too slowly? And, the answer I gave him was it really just, if you optimize your images and have them set up to load the correct way, the sky should be the limit, because most things are pretty quick these days. Let's see, as of mobile and responsive design. So what's going on here is that starting in April of this year, when Google looks at a website to return in the results, it looks at the user's device. So if we are working with a site that's not optimized for mobile, it will not be high up in the results if you're looking on a phone. And so that's huge because that impacts your overall traffic figures as well. So if your traffic goes down because people aren't reaching you on mobile, you're going to get kind of a double ding on where you're returning in the search results. So that's huge. And it looks at whether it's, optimized for mobile as well as for tablet devices and that kind of thing. Let's see, what else? Moving on.
Sorry, social media is buried there, but.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
There we go, that's okay. Now, social media, this is something I've actually never seen official confirmation on whether this is in the algorithm. I know a few years ago, Google Plus and using your Google authorship whenever you had a blog entry was very important. But Google has definitely backed off of that in the past year or so, the past couple years actually. And it has not confirmed that they are looking at other social media, but the anecdotal evidence is overwhelmingly shows that they are looking at Facebook and Twitter activity. And of course on our new TECH B2B website and on every other one that we've done recently, of course we make sure to have those social links on the blog pages. Also in the main navigation bars and anywhere else where it makes sense, because that kind of social media presence and activity gives your site a boost. And along with that, and I can't remember if we mentioned it before, but the freshness of your content, they do also look at how often you're posting things to the website. It does love fresh content and rewards that activity.
And one has to assume at some point the influencer, that there's going to be an influencer criteria, which has to do with followers, retweets, how many times something that you write is being shared.
100%. That's something they haven't verified, but everybody can see that activity. And that actually, I'll skip ahead a little bit. I have a little note at the bottom of this slide about backlinks. That's been, the term forever in SEO is how many places are linking into your site. Well, that was yet one of many things that's been completely and totally abused by, black hat SEO, where you can pay money for people to list links to your site. Well, it's starting to be that just a brand mention is helping more than a backlink because it's more natural and it's more likely to be real. So Google, it's kind of like an implied link, and Google is looking at those things now as opposed to an explicit link that's really there. So a brand mention is as good as that link now. And I don't know if it's a one-for-one, but it's definitely something that's increasing. And along those lines, and it's something I don't think that we've ever dealt with, or hopefully won't have to deal with, but there are some negative SEO techniques where, for instance, a competitor would get a shady website put together that links a whole bunch of times back to your company's legitimate website in order to get you punished by Google, basically. And those things can take a really long time to resolve. So that's something that some bigger companies I know have had to deal with in the past year or two. And so hopefully that's something we don't have to think about, but something that's out there. Yeah, something else to have nightmares about. So anyhow, like I said, we are, the things I'm doing on the back end to improve SEO are really about making it easier for the search engines, not about trying to trick them or anything like that. It's not telling them anything they don't know, but creating and submitting a sitemap to Google through the Google Search Console. You might have heard it called Google Webmasters Tools, but that changed a couple months ago. And that speeds up how quickly your site will get crawled. Big sites or slow sites take longer to get crawled because Google has to, use more server resources to get into that. But using a search engine account, we can track the search engine return pages for the keywords and things that we would be looking at. And we also link that to a Google Analytics account. So it kind of provides different levels of information, both of which kind of have their place. Speaking of which, generally speaking, using those Google tools will help your site get indexed more quickly. And those tools can also include the CAPTCHA code from the Google Security Suite, AdWords, a product feed if we are having like an online store. And the reason behind that is that Google needs to verify your site. Like when we're saying, if you don't have the content to support a keywords account, or a keywords ad campaign, Google will deny you. Well, in order to do that, they have to go in and crawl your site to see what your content is. So we can kind of encourage Google to index you more quickly by using those tools. Now, it doesn't give you necessarily a boost in that it's going to rank you higher, but at least it knows we're out there more quickly, which is important. Let's see, local business listings is huge, especially if for companies that are more regional or local. Creating and submitting a Google business listing and a Bing business listing and whatever else is out there is important because they give you those map returns when you're searching. And Wynn and I kind of looked at this earlier this year, and the default on Google search engine is that it gives you local listings. So it knows your location for the most part, unless you've turned that off. And I know most people leave it on their, their smartphones or whatever, so that they can get maps and local content when they're out and about. And so by having that on, they're going to give you local returns. So you want to have your business listing in that return.
Makes it more difficult for national companies like the business-to-business, national, international companies that we serve sometimes. At least to my mind, it does. Because you have
I think you're right.
These people are trying to grow their business by going more and more online, and yet Google's kind of pushing the other way because it's kind of in the consumer's best interest 90% of the time to return local search results. But
yeah, it's definitely more a consumer-oriented thing rather than a B2B-oriented thing in my mind, which does make it more difficult for us.
And it's another little bit of irony, the Google business listing. For some of our clients, we actually had to fill out a paper form. Wasn't that correct, Sarah?
No.
Or did they send us a letter? Which one was it?
No, they send you a postcard. It's very old school. They send you a postcard, a little paper. It's very funny for me to get mail from Google. But yeah, they send you a postcard that has a key code on it or a PIN code to verify your physical address. And that is to prevent people from cheating and listing a bunch of different P.O. boxes or a bunch of different random addresses as their location to cheat the local business listing methodology. Yeah, so you have to then go to your computer and key in this paper, code from your
was involved somewhere. I knew
yeah,
it was
there's
somewhere.
snail mail still. So let's see. Oh, okay, I just had two quick points on left on this page. One was domain longevity count. So if you have an established domain name, do not just throw it away on a whim because you're going to lose that good karma that domain has. And then related to that is a domain authority, which I don't really like to use too much or to worry about just because it's so hard to influence it. There's not a whole heck of a lot you can do to increase your domain authority because it's based on like a large number of external factors, including how long you've had that domain and backlinks and things that are more difficult to build and just take time. But it is kind of nice to use it if you wanted to compare how you're doing to a competitor's website and thinking, okay, well, there's no reason I should not, be matching this person on this factor. But really, it's kind of something that if you have a good SEO plan, it's going to increase over time and do better as long as you stay at the same domain. So, any questions on any of that?
Sarah, is anything on the domain authority? That gets into the classifications of the backlinks, right? That's
a huge part of it is backlinks. Backlinks and traffic counts. So if you have a new domain or a new company and it's starting out without a lot of traffic, you're going to get a low domain authority number, and there's just not much you can do about it until you get that traffic, until you've established that. So really just making sure that everything else we've talked about is up to date. You're going to be doing as well as you can do.
What's interesting is that two things that you would think that, so you want to have backlinks from sites that have a lot of information and a lot of authority themselves. That's the general concept, right? Sites that are recognized as thought leaders. Now, normally you might think that trade publications and so forth that are totally focused on a given industry would be a thought leader in that industry. But time and time again, it seems like Google and Bing's indexing is so slow that you don't always get the latest articles, the latest stuff from the media appearing up high on search returns, which makes you wonder how much is your public relations activity, and outbound public relations, how much is that influencing your domain authority? If we get a bunch of stories published for a particular client, and Google may not be paying as much attention to the medias that we're using. I don't know. You just wonder sometimes,
No, I think
associations and standards development organizations are certainly important. These kind of nonprofit type deals, quote unquote. But I don't know.
Well, and I'm also curious on the lag. No. I totally agree. That's a great question, and I'm curious myself. How long it takes to get that boost when it finally does get around to crawling those sites and that information. Because we can say an activity, sure, we did something this year and it didn't immediately improve our SEO, but over time, if we give it 12 months, are we having an impact then? Because I feel like SEO is definitely like building a I don't know what the word is, building a body of work almost that the search engines can go back to establish their authority. So the timeliness on that is definitely a confusing factor.
Yeah, it's when you do a specific news search on a Google Advanced Search, you won't come up with things, even though I don't know. Maybe it's just the news part of their site is tweaky. Shall I go on to the next?
Yeah.
Good news, guys. Last slide.
I think, and I'll turn it over to you here, Wynn. I just wanted to, I guess, with this at the end, point out that it's easy to get caught up in the metrics of how something is performing, and obviously that's hugely important. But the most important thing, too, to me, isn't just the raw traffic, but it's providing, kind of building that body of your website, like I was talking about, and encouraging user conversions, and then constantly be evolving it. I'm sorry, that was bad English there, but it's a constant cycle of providing the content, measuring how it does, changing it, tweaking it, and adding to it. That I think is, over the long haul, what's going to be the best strategy for improving our sites. Just, putting it out there the first time isn't going to be, isn't going to do what you would hope it would do, but it's, the evolution over time that will. Yeah,
customers always want to build and forget when it comes to the website, and that's, that's That's why we always push them into blogging and try to drive that into their processes and procedures so that they can organically be creating content and feeding their own website on a regular basis. So
yes, it's a machine that needs always feeding.
Yes, it is. And you know, it's interesting. I mean, really what we're doing is the machine is trying to make sure the website is there to serve the general public. And Google and out there is just trying to figure out, you know, who's serving the public the best on, you know, whether it's in a particular industry or on a specific subject matter. So, you know, if your heart's in the right place and you're putting the effort and the time into it, you're going to win. You know, but there's no real shortcut. In the past there were shortcuts. I mean, I know we had a startup. We worked for a startup company about 5 or 6 years ago, who within the first year in industrial imaging was on first page Google results. You know, even though they didn't have a long-term domain, but they were very smart. They engaged with any blogger out there who was actively blogging in industrial automation space, and you know, back then, you know, it really wasn't considered terrible to pay a fee to get a link from a particular blog back to, you know, and for them to carry your news and things of that nature. But I don't think that's going to work so much these days. And I think bloggers that do that probably will find their own performance suffering, since it's all, you know, just like the YouTube generation. You're all about generating traffic as a way to monetize your work and effort. But
yeah, the field's a lot more. It's just more crowded and more mature, I think.
Yeah.
So it is harder to make things like that work. And that, you said, though, even though that was a few years ago, it is a constant effort if you want to make that happen, which would require a lot of a client buy-in to get that much effort and activity put forth to get something to the top like that.
Absolutely. You know, if anybody ever wants to look anymore, you know, we got the social media presentation up on the site, and a big part of that, since it's not your normal social media presentation, is about how to not aggregate content, but how the ways you can use a blog to build your site that makes sense for your industry. You know, I mean, it's just about telling our customers, hey, you're talking with customers about new regulations or standards or things that are coming down the pipe all the time. Instead of taking a second to write an email to your buddy or your boss, just take a second to put it on the blog, and it'll get pushed out to your email or your boss. You know, it's more about changing a mindset than it is really changing how we major business processes. So, all right. Well, any other questions before we shut down today and get back to it?
No, thank you for leading this and the education. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a lot of good stuff.
Our pleasure. Any other questions, just give us a shout. And thanks for everybody for joining us today. And Sarah, thanks for helping put together the presentation. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks.